A black CEO boards a flight expecting the first-class seat he paid for. Instead, prejudice and arrogance strip it from him. But minutes later, the cabin learns the shocking truth. He holds the power to ground the entire plane, and he's about to use it. The terminal buzzed with the usual chaos, boarding calls echoing through speakers, rolling suitcases clattering across tiled floors, travelers clutching coffee as they hurried toward gates. At the very front of the boarding line stood a man whose presence was impossible to miss. Tall, confident, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of authority, he radiated quiet control. His name was Marcus Reed, a CEO whose decisions moved markets and whose signature inked billion-dollar contracts. But today, Marcus wasn't a mogul. He was just a passenger, traveling like anyone else. He handed over his first-class boarding pass with a polite nod, then strode down the jet bridge with the calm assurance of someone who had earned his place. Inside, he placed his briefcase in the overhead bin, settled into his wide leather seat, and exhaled. For a moment, it seemed like any other flight. Passengers filed in, attendants greeted them, the cabin filled with the familiar shuffle of boarding. But then, a flicker of tension rippled through first class. A white passenger, a middle-aged man in an expensive blazer, stopped short at Marcus's row. His eyes narrowed, his lips curled. "You're in my seat," the man barked, his voice dripping with indignation. Marcus blinked calm. He pulled out his boarding pass, held it out. "No," he said evenly. "This is my seat." The man scoffed, refusing to look at the ticket. "First class? Really?" His tone wasn't confusion, it was contempt. "There must be some mistake. People like you don't belong here." The words landed heavy, sharp enough that nearby passengers turned, their faces tightening with discomfort. A couple whispered, shifting uneasily. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "There's no mistake. This is my seat. You should check your ticket." But before the man could answer, a flight attendant hurried over. Young, polished, her smile was brittle, almost performative. She glanced between Marcus and the man in the blazer, and then, without even asking questions, she sided with the latter. "Sir," she said to Marcus, her tone clipped, "I'm going to need you to step out of this seat. This passenger has requested it." Requested it. Not earned it, not purchased it, requested it. Marcus tilted his head, incredulous. "I paid for this seat. Here's my boarding pass. I'm not moving." The attendant's smile faltered, irritation flickering in her eyes. "Sir, I don't want to make a scene. Please, just cooperate." A murmur spread through the cabin. A woman across the aisle frowned. A businessman behind Marcus muttered, "That's not right." Yet the attendant pressed on, lowering her voice but sharpening her edge. "If you don't comply, we may have to ask you to leave the aircraft altogether." The words stung. Passengers shifted, eyes darting between Marcus and the crew. The man in the blazer smirked, arms crossed, as if victory had already been declared. And then, against reason, against fairness, Marcus was forced out of his seat. He gathered his things, his expression unreadable, and stepped into the aisle. They reassigned him to coach, wedged into a cramped middle seat. A hush followed him down the aisle, a mix of shame and unease radiating from those who had witnessed what just happened. But what no one knew, not the arrogant passenger, not the attendant, not even the captain, was that Marcus Reed wasn't just any businessman. He was the CEO of the holding company that owned this very airline. And in mere minutes, the power dynamics of this flight would shift in ways no one could have imagined. The plane taxied away from the gate, engines roaring to life. The cabin dimmed, the safety demonstration concluded, and passengers settled into their seats. Yet the atmosphere remained heavy, charged with the memory of what had just transpired. In the middle of coach, Marcus sat silently, his long frame awkwardly folded into the narrow space. To the casual observer, he looked calm, but his mind burned. Not with embarrassment, he'd endured enough in his life to withstand humiliation, but with something deeper, the betrayal of knowing this wasn't just about him. This was about every traveler who had ever been judged, dismissed, or stripped of dignity because of prejudice. A child across the aisle peeked at him curiously. An older woman leaned forward and whispered, "I'm so sorry, sir. That wasn't right." Marcus gave her a small nod of gratitude, but his gaze was fixed ahead. He had a decision to make. Meanwhile, in first class, the man in the blazer reclined smugly, sipping champagne, as though his victory were well earned. The flight attendant checked on him with exaggerated care, smiling brightly, while pointedly avoiding Marcus's section of the plane. But the other passengers hadn't forgotten. A murmur began, voices low but insistent. "He had the ticket. That wasn't fair. Why didn't she even check?" Slowly, indignation grew. By the time the plane leveled at cruising altitude, Marcus had pulled out his phone. He opened a secure line, one reserved for executives with the power to move mountains. A few taps, and he was connected directly to the airline's operations command. "This is Marcus Reed," he said quietly, his voice steady. "Ground this aircraft immediately. I want it rerouted back to the nearest hub. Effective now." The operator on the other end froze, their tone shifting instantly into urgency. "Yes, sir." "Understood." Moments later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an operational directive, we will be returning to the airport. Please remain seated and follow all crew instructions." The cabin erupted in confusion. Gasps, whispers, questions. "What happened? Why are we turning around?" The man in the blazer frowned, glancing around nervously. The attendant's smile faltered, panic creeping into her eyes. In coach, Marcus sat still, his phone in his lap, his expression carved from stone. Around him, passengers began piecing it together. Some had overheard. Others guessed. The murmurs grew louder. "He called it in. He's someone important. Did you see how she treated him?" The flight attendant rushed down the aisle, her voice tight. "Sir, what did you do? Did you cause this?" Marcus looked up, his gaze piercing. "What I did," he said calmly, "was take responsibility for my airline. Something you failed to do when you chose prejudice over professionalism." The attendant paled, her mouth opening and closing, words failing her. Passengers stared, realization dawning across the cabin. The man in the blazer muttered, "Your airline?" his tone dripping with disbelief. But already, whispers were spreading faster than turbulence. Marcus Reed, CEO. The man they had humiliated wasn't just any passenger. He was the man who signed the paychecks, who determined the very future of the company. The plane touched down with a jolt, taxiing back toward the terminal under a shroud of confusion. Passengers peered out windows, craning their necks as if expecting answers on the tarmac. Inside, tension thickened with every passing second. As the seatbelt sign dimmed, Marcus rose from his cramped seat. The cabin hushed. He moved deliberately up the aisle, his height and presence reclaiming the authority stolen from him earlier. When he reached first class, he stopped, turning slowly to address the cabin. "I don't usually make a scene," he began, his voice deep, resonant, carrying effortlessly over the whispers. "But today, I was forced from a seat I purchased, not because of a mistake, not because of a system error, but because of prejudice. And because the people meant to uphold fairness chose arrogance over accountability." Gasps followed his words. The man in the blazer shrank in his seat, suddenly less sure of himself. The attendant's face burned crimson, her hands trembling as she clutched her service tablet. Marcus continued, his gaze sweeping the cabin. "For those of you wondering who I am, my name is Marcus Reed. I am the CEO of the corporation that owns this airline." The silence was deafening. A woman in the back whispered, "I knew it." A man muttered, "Unbelievable." Phones were raised now, recording every word. Marcus's tone sharpened. "And I want every passenger here to remember what you witnessed. Not for my sake, but for every traveler who has been judged by the color of their skin, denied dignity, or silenced by those in power. This ends today." He turned to the attendant, whose eyes brimmed with tears. "You are relieved of duty. Effective immediately." Security will escort you off this aircraft. The woman stammered. Sir, I didn't. You did. Marcus cut her off, his voice like steel. And you will live with the consequences. The passengers erupted, some in applause, some in stunned silence. A man clapped slowly, then louder, until others joined in. The trip back to the gate was filled with murmurs of awe, respect, and disbelief. As the cabin doors opened, uniformed staff boarded. The attendant was quietly escorted away, her head bowed, her career in shambles. The man in the blazer tried to shrink into his seat, but Marcus's eyes cut to him briefly, delivering a silent message. Some lessons burn hotter when no words are needed. Marcus collected his briefcase, his posture unshakable, his presence undeniable. He turned once more to the passengers, his voice steady but laced with finality. This airline will change. This I promise you. And it starts now. He exited the plane, leaving behind a cabin full of witnesses who would carry the story long after their journeys resumed. And within hours, the videos spread, an airline brought to its knees not by scandal, but by the refusal of one man to stay silent in the face of injustice. If you were sitting on that plane, would you have spoken up before the CEO revealed who he was? Stories like this remind us that silence protects prejudice, but courage, even from one voice, can bring it crashing down. If you believe in standing up against injustice, make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more stories that uncover the truth.